A first-class ticket, a world-renowned surgeon, and his young daughter. It should have been a simple, comfortable journey. But when station manager Evelyn Reed laid eyes on Dr. Elijah Vance, she didn't see a man flying across the country to save a child's life. She saw a problem. She saw someone who, in her twisted view, didn't belong. In the crowded, chaotic terminal of Chicago O'Hare, she decided to make him her target, unleashing a torrent of prejudice and misplaced authority. She had no idea her entire world was about to be dismantled piece by piece by the one man in the crowd she should have been terrified to offend. The air in Terminal 3 of Chicago O'Hare International Airport was thick with the uniquely stressful cocktail of stale air, Cinnabon, and collective anxiety. For Dr. Elijah Vance, it was just background noise. He sat calmly, a stark island of tranquility, in a sea of hurried travelers and frustrated families. Beside him, his 10-year-old daughter Lily was lost in a thick fantasy novel. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she navigated worlds of dragons and wizards. Elijah smiled softly. These moments were precious. His life as one of the country's leading pediatric cardiothoracic surgeons was a whirlwind of 16-hour days, high-stakes procedures, and the emotional weight of holding tiny, fragile hearts in his hands. A cross-country flight, even one for a critical consultation, was a rare opportunity to simply be Dad. He was dressed for comfort, not for court. A soft grey hoodie, well-worn jeans, and a pair of comfortable sneakers. The only hint of his profession was the expensive, durable leather messenger bag at his feet, which contained not just his laptop and Lily's tablet, but also sensitive medical files for the case awaiting him in San Francisco, a complex congenital heart defect in a 5-year-old girl. The surgery was in 36 hours. This flight was not optional. Flight 8112 to San Francisco is now delayed by an additional 45 minutes. A disembodied voice announced, eliciting a collective groan from Gate K-12. Lily looked up, her big brown eyes filled with concern. "Are we going to be late, Daddy?" "No, sweetie," he reassured her, stroking her braided hair. "We have plenty of time. It just means a little more time for you to finish that chapter." She beamed and dove back into her book. Elijah checked their boarding passes on his phone again. Seats 2A and 2B. First class. It was a necessary luxury he afforded himself on these critical work trips. The extra space allowed him to review files. The quiet let him clear his head, and most importantly, it ensured he arrived rested and ready to perform at the peak of his abilities. When a child's life was on the line, fatigue was a liability he refused to entertain. The gate area was a controlled chaos. The two gate agents, a young flustered-looking woman named Sarah and an older, more stoic man, were doing their best to manage the growing crowd of disgruntled passengers. An argument had broken out near the desk over a carry-on bag that was clearly oversized. Elijah decided to use the extra time to confirm a small detail about their seats. He'd requested a specific type of outlet to ensure his laptop holding the 3D models of the patient's heart would remain charged. He approached the counter during a lull, Lily's hand in his. "Excuse me," he said politely to Sarah, who looked up with weary eyes. "I'm Dr. Vance in seat 2A. I just wanted to quickly confirm the power port situation at the seat. I have a rather vital piece of equipment I need to keep charged." Sarah typed his name into the computer. "Vance? Yes, I see you here. Let me check the aircraft schematics for you. It should be a standard 110-volt outlet, sir." She was trying to be helpful, her fingers clicking away. Suddenly, a sharp, imperious voice cut through the air like a shard of glass. "What seems to be the problem here, Sarah?" A woman with a severe blonde bob, immaculate makeup, and a navy blue suit that looked starched to within an inch of its life, strode toward the counter. Her name tag read, Evelyn Reed, Station Manager. Her eyes scanned the scene with the predatory gaze of a hawk looking for a field mouse. She didn't look at Elijah. She looked through him, her gaze dismissing him as part of the chaotic scenery. "No problem, Miss Reed," Sarah said, her voice tightening. "This gentleman was just asking about the power outlets in first class." Evelyn Reed's eyes finally landed on Elijah. They traveled from his comfortable sneakers up to his hoodie, and her perfectly lipsticked mouth tightened into a moo of disapproval. It was a fractional change in expression, but it was as loud as a slamming door. She saw his casual attire, his black skin, and a switch flipped in her mind. An entire narrative was written, edited, and published in the space of a single, contemptuous glance. "First class," she repeated, her voice dripping with a cloying, disbelieving sweetness. She turned to her monitor, elbowing Sarah aside with a practiced, subtle aggression. "Let me see your boarding pass." It wasn't a request. It was a command laced with the clear implication that he was in the wrong place. The storm had arrived, and Elijah Vance, a man who faced down death daily with a steady hand, knew he was now in a different kind of fight. Elijah felt a familiar, weary tightening in his chest. It was a feeling he'd known his whole life, the quiet click of being recategorized, of having to prove his existence in a space where others were simply accepted. He maintained his calm for Lily's sake, as much as his own. She was watching her book, forgotten, her senses attuned to the shift in tone. He unlocked his phone and showed the QR code for his boarding pass to Evelyn. "Here you are. Elijah Vance, seat 2A. Evelyn Reed didn't scan the code. She squinted at the screen, her expression one of profound skepticism, as if he were presenting a hand-drawn forgery. "Vance," she muttered, typing the name with slow, deliberate taps of her long, manicured nails. The staccato clicks echoed in the tense silence that had fallen around the desk. She said, a small theatrical sound of doubt. "The system can be glitchy. Are you sure you're at the right gate? Sometimes the app redirects passengers incorrectly." "I'm quite sure," Elijah replied, his voice even and low. "Flight 8112 to San Francisco. Gate K12, it says so right here." "I see what it says." Evelyn snapped her voice, losing its faux sweetness and gaining a sharp metallic edge. "But what I'm seeing is an anomaly. Let me see your identification." This was the next step in the playbook of baseless suspicion. Elijah calmly took out his wallet and produced his driver's license. Lily shuffled her feet, pressing closer against his leg. She knew this game too, even at 10. She'd seen it in stores, in restaurants. The extra questions, the lingering stares. Evelyn took the license and held it next to his phone, comparing the name Elijah K. Vance, as if she were a forensic investigator searching for a microscopic flaw. The line behind them was growing, and murmurs were starting to ripple through the crowd. A businessman in an expensive suit shifted his weight impatiently. "Is there a problem? Some of us would like to get information about the delay." Evelyn shot him a withering glare. "I am handling a sensitive security matter, sir. Your patience is required." Security matter. The words hung in the air, venomous and loaded. Elijah's jaw tightened. He had been transformed from a passenger with a simple question into a potential threat. "There is no security matter," Elijah stated, his voice firm but controlled. "I am a ticketed first-class passenger asking about an electrical outlet. You have my boarding pass and my government-issued ID. Is there something else you require, Ms. Reed?" Using her name was a deliberate choice. He was reminding her that he saw her, that she was a specific person, not just an anonymous force of bureaucracy. It only seemed to anger her more. She felt her authority being challenged. "There's something else I require," she said, leaning over the counter. Her voice, a conspiratorial whisper that carried across the entire gate area, is an explanation. These seats are typically booked far in advance by our executive-level frequent flyers. It is highly unusual for a last-minute booking, especially one with a non-corporate card, to be processed for this cabin. She was inventing facts, weaving a narrative of suspicion from thin air. Elijah had booked this ticket a week ago through the hospital's corporate travel agency. "I can assure you my ticket was not booked last minute," he said coolly. "And how my ticket was paid for is, with all due respect, none of your business. It is a valid ticket for which your airline has received payment." "Everything about my airline is my business," Evelyn retorted, her voice rising in volume. "It is my job to protect the integrity of our premium cabins and ensure the comfort and safety of our legitimate passengers." The implication was as clear as it was ugly. He was not a legitimate passenger. He was an interloper, a fraud. The passengers in line were now openly staring, some with sympathy, others with suspicion, their minds poisoned by Evelyn's performance. Sarah, the younger gate agent, looked horrified, her face pale. She tried to lean in and whisper something to Evelyn, but the manager waved her away with a flick of her wrist. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. Elijah placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just a misunderstanding. This woman is just a little confused." Evelyn heard him. Her eyes flashed with fury. "Confused? I am the station manager at one of the busiest airports in the world. I'm never confused. What I am is thorough. And right now, I have a strong suspicion that this ticket is fraudulent. Perhaps you used a stolen credit card or found a loophole in our booking system." The accusation was now public, loud, and slanderous. Elijah felt the heat rise in his neck, a primal anger he had spent a lifetime learning to control. He could dismantle her arguments with surgical precision. He could pull out his hospital ID, his credentials. He could list the medical conferences he'd keynoted. But why should he? Why should he have to lay out his entire life's resume to justify his presence in a space he had paid for? He took a deep, centering breath. "Ms. Reed, you are making a series of baseless and offensive accusations. You are also creating a significant disturbance. I suggest you either verify my ticket and let me return to my seat, or you call airport security. But this public harassment ends now." He had drawn a line. But for Evelyn Reed, it was a line she was more than happy to cross. This was no longer about a ticket. It was about power. It was about putting someone she had already judged and convicted in her mind back in their place. "Oh, you want security?" she said with a malicious smile. "That can be arranged. I think they'll be very interested in your story." She reached for the phone on the counter, her movements slow and deliberate, savoring the moment. She was a queen on her throne, and she was about to pass sentence. The moment Evelyn Reed's fingers touched the telephone, the atmosphere at gate K-12 curdled. What had been a tense confrontation was about to escalate into an official incident with reports, security officers, and the very real possibility of Elijah being detained, all for the crime of being a black man in a hoodie holding a first-class ticket. "That will not be necessary," Elijah said, his voice now carrying a new weight of command. It was the voice he used in the operating room, the one that cut through panic and instilled focus. "You are making a grave mistake, Ms. Reed." "The only mistake," she sneered, lifting the receiver, Was you thinking you could pull a fast one at my station? People like you always think you're so clever, gaming the system. You think you can just show up and waltz into a cabin that costs more than you make in a month." The words, dripping with undisguised racism, struck him like a physical blow. People like you. The oldest, ugliest catch-all for prejudice. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Lily flinched, her eyes welling with tears. She understood the insult, the sheer meanness of it. Elijah instinctively pulled her closer, shielding her slightly with his body, as if to protect her from the verbal venom. His own anger was a white-hot coal in his gut. But he knew that showing it would only validate Evelyn's narrative. They would call it aggression. They would see his justified rage and label it a threat. It was a trap, and he refused to step into it. "My financial status is not your concern," he said, his words precise and cold. "My profession is not your concern. My race, which seems to be your primary concern, is most certainly not your business. Your business is to honor the contract I have with your airline. You have failed to do that. Instead, you have chosen to publicly humiliate me and my daughter." A young man in the line who had been watching the scene unfold, with a grim expression, finally spoke up. "For God's sake, lady, leave the man alone. He showed you his ID. What more do you want?" Evelyn wheeled on him. "This does not concern you, sir. I am following airline protocol." "What protocol?" A woman added, her voice sharp with indignation. "The harass a passenger protocol. I've been flying this airline for 20 years, and I've never seen such disgusting behavior from an employee." Support was beginning to bubble up from the crowd, but for Evelyn it was like gasoline on a fire. She felt her control slipping, and she doubled down, her voice rising to a near shout. "He refuses to cooperate. He is being belligerent." This is exactly how these things start. She was no longer speaking to Elijah, but to the audience, trying to win them back to her side, painting him as the aggressor. This man is a potential risk. For all we know, he could be using a fake ID, a fake ticket to get access to the front of the plane. It's a classic security breach scenario. She was inventing a fantasy, a drama, where she was the hero protecting the skies from a cunning villain who happened to look like Dr. Elijah Vance. The absurdity was breathtaking. "I am a doctor." Elijah said the words falling from his lips before he could stop them. He hated having to play this card, to use his title as a shield. It felt like a concession. "I am traveling to San Francisco for a medical emergency. I am needed at UCSF Children's Hospital for a critical surgery. By detaining me, Ms. Reed, you are not just violating my rights. You are potentially endangering the life of a child." He'd hoped this revelation would shock her back to her senses. He was wrong. Evelyn Reed let out a short, barking laugh of pure disbelief. "A doctor? Oh, please. You're a doctor like I'm an astronaut. What kind of doctor dresses like he's going to a skate park? You're probably a rapper or a basketball player looking for a free upgrade. Don't lie to me. It's insulting." The stereotype was so blatant, so utterly without shame, that a gasp went through the onlookers. The young man who had spoken earlier now had his phone out, discreetly recording. Sarah, the junior agent, looked as if she was about to be physically ill. This was the final straw. The insult to his profession, the profession he had dedicated his life to, the one that cost him sleep and time with his family, was a line too far. But before Elijah could formulate a response that wouldn't get him arrested, a calm, quiet voice spoke from just behind him. "He is in fact a doctor, and I'd wager he is one of the finest pediatric cardiothoracic surgeons in the entire world." The voice was not loud, but it had an immediate and profound effect. It sliced through Evelyn's tirade, a rapier of quiet authority. The crowd parted slightly. A man in his late 60s, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored grey suit, stepped forward. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and a deeply lined face that spoke of many sleepless nights and heavy decisions. He moved with an unhurried grace that commanded attention. He stopped beside Elijah, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder for a brief moment, a gesture of solidarity. Then he turned his calm, assessing gaze on Evelyn Reed. Evelyn, caught mid-rant, stared at the man. She recognized him as one of the passengers who had been sitting quietly in the first-class lounge. A VIP, clearly. Her mind scrambled to shift gears. This was an opportunity to impress, to show a high-value customer how seriously she took security. "Sir, I apologize for the disturbance," she said, her voice instantly reverting to its syrupy professional tone. "As you can see, we have a situation here. This man was attempting to board with a questionable ticket, and I was just about to call security to have him removed. I take the safety of our elite passengers, like yourself, very seriously." She smiled a confident, self-congratulatory expression. She had no idea she was not just digging her own grave. She was salting the earth above it. The man's expression did not change. His gaze remained level, his voice soft, but now with an undertone of freezing steel. "My name is Alistair Finch," he said, "and I can assure you, Ms. Reed, you do not take my safety seriously at all." The name Alistair Finch hung in the air for a moment, meaningless to the passengers, but striking a chord of vague recognition in Evelyn Reed's mind. Finch was not a common name. She knew she'd seen it in corporate newsletters and high-level memos usually attached to a signature line. Her brain, however, was still focused on managing the VIP in front of her. "Mr. Finch, a pleasure," she said, extending a hand that he made no move to take. "Rest assured I'll have this individual removed from the gate area momentarily so that you and the other legitimate passengers can board in peace once the delay is sorted." She gestured dismissively toward Elijah, as if he were a piece of luggage left in the walkway. Alistair Finch's eyes, a pale, piercing blue, remained fixed on her. "You will do no such thing. The individual you're referring to is Dr. Elijah Vance, and he is without question the most important passenger on this aircraft today. Perhaps the most important passenger this airline will carry all year." Evelyn's practiced smile faltered. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. I don't understand, sir. His ticket showed several irregularities." She was backpedaling, still clinging to the fiction she had created. "There are no irregularities," Finch said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "The ticket was booked through our top-tier corporate concierge service. The payment was processed through the UCSF Medical Center's executive account, an account I personally authorized." The word "I" was emphasized just enough to send a jolt through Evelyn. Her mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. Finch, corporate, UCSF. Elijah, who had been standing in stunned silence, finally looked at the man. He didn't recognize him. He assumed he must be a hospital administrator or a wealthy donor he hadn't yet met. He offered a small, grateful nod. "Thank you," he murmured. "I appreciate the clarification." Finch turned to him, and for the first time his stern expression softened into one of genuine warmth and profound respect. "Dr. Vance, it is an honor to finally meet you in person, though I am deeply, deeply ashamed that this is the circumstance." He then looked down at Lily, who was peering up at him with wide, curious eyes. "And you must be Lily. Your father is a great man." Lily, unused to such pronouncements, blushed and hid behind her father's leg. Evelyn watched this exchange with growing horror. The calm, respectful way this powerful man, spoke to the person she had just publicly accused of being a freeloader and a criminal was a jarring dissonance. Her carefully constructed reality was beginning to fracture at the seams. "Sir," she stammered, her voice a few octaves higher than usual. "With all due respect, who are you?" Alistair Finch turned his gaze back to her, and the warmth vanished, replaced by an arctic chill. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a slim, elegant wallet. He didn't show her an ID, he produced a business card. It was thick, cream-colored stock with simple, embossed lettering. He held it out for her to read. The card said, "Alistair Finch, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Apex Air." The silence that followed was absolute. The background hum of the airport seemed to fade away. Passengers who had been murmuring and recording on their phones went still. Sarah, the junior agent, looked like she had seen a ghost. Evelyn Reed stared at the card. Her face, which had been a mask of smug authority, crumbled. The blood drained from it, leaving behind a pasty greyish pallor that clashed horribly with her bright red lipstick. Her eyes darted from the name on the card to the face of the man holding it, and finally, true soul-shattering comprehension dawned. This wasn't just a VIP. This wasn't a high-value customer. This was the man whose family name was on the tail of every single plane in their fleet. The man who owned the entire airline. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The phone receiver she had been holding with such theatrical menace slipped from her sweaty palm, clattering onto the counter with a loud crack of plastic. Finch didn't revel in her shock. His expression was one of deep, soul-weary disappointment. "I fly on my own airline unannounced at least once a month, Ms. Reed," he said, his voice still unnervingly quiet. "I do it to see firsthand what our customers experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today you have shown me the absolute ugliest face of the company I have spent my life building." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into the petrified woman before him. "You asked Dr. Vance what kind of doctor dresses like him. You publicly berated him. You accused him of fraud. You threatened him. You did all of this in front of his child. All because you looked at a black man in a hoodie and your mind, poisoned by bigotry, filled in the rest of the blanks with the most vile stereotypes." He took a step closer, and Evelyn flinched as if he had raised a hand. "Now," Alistair Finch said, his voice dropping even lower, becoming a razor-sharp whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "Let me tell you who you have been terrorizing for the last 20 minutes. The gate area had transformed into a silent theater. Every passenger, every employee was frozen. Their attention locked on the drama unfolding at the counter. Alistair Finch, the unassuming man in the grey suit, now held the absolute focus of everyone present. He was no longer just a passenger. He was the judge, jury, and as Evelyn Reed was about to discover the executioner. "You see, Ms. Reed," Finch began, his voice a low, controlled rumble of suppressed fury. "My connection to Dr. Vance isn't just professional. It's personal, deeply personal." He turned slightly to face the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the silent onlookers. "Many of you are frustrated by this delay. I know I was. Our official reason is a mechanical issue with the forward galley. That's a lie. A partial one, at least. The truth is, I ordered this flight held." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Evelyn's eyes were wide with terror, her mind unable to process the direction this was heading. "I held the flight," Finch continued, turning his searing gaze back to Evelyn, "because Dr. Vance was running late. Not through any fault of his own, but because his connecting flight from a conference was delayed by weather, and I could not. I would not let this plane leave without him. You see, the medical emergency he is flying to is not just some anonymous patient. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. He looked at Elijah with an expression of immense gratitude before facing Evelyn again. My granddaughter Chloe is 5 years old. For the last 6 months, she has been at UCSF Children's Hospital fighting for her life. She was born with a condition called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Her heart, it isn't strong enough. We've been through 2 surgeries already, and her little body is beginning to fail. The doctors there, a brilliant team, told us 2 weeks ago there was only one person they believed had the skill and the innovative technique to attempt the next procedure. A high-risk radical surgery that is Chloe's last and only hope. He let the silence hang in the air, the sheer gravity of his words pressing down on everyone. Elijah stood stoically, his face a mask of professional compassion. He was aware of the personal connection now, but his focus remained on the patient, the little girl at the end of this journey. Finch's voice dropped raw, with the pain of a grandfather's love. That surgeon is Dr. Elijah Vance. The revelation struck the gate area like a bolt of lightning. A collective audible gasp was heard. The businessman, who had been impatient earlier, now looked at Elijah with awe. The woman who had defended him had tears in her eyes. The young man's phone was still recording, capturing every devastating second of Evelyn Reed's world imploding. Evelyn herself looked as if she had been turned to stone. The reality of what she had done crashed down on her with the force of a physical blow. The man she had ridiculed, racially profiled, and threatened to have arrested was not just a world-class surgeon. He was the one man on earth who held her boss's granddaughter's life in his hands. The life of Chloe Finch. She had not just been a racist and a bully. She had actively, aggressively tried to prevent the man who was her ultimate employer's last hope from getting on a plane. The sheer cosmic irony of it was suffocating. Her ambition, her obsession with rules and appearances, her ugly, festering prejudice, it had all led her to this moment of absolute ruin, a self-immolation so complete it was almost poetic. "So you see, Ms. Reed," Alistair Finch said, his voice regaining its icy composure. "When you looked at Dr. Vance, you didn't see a hero. You didn't see a brilliant medical mind. You didn't see a father. You saw a threat, a criminal, someone who didn't belong in first class." He leaned in his face, inches from hers. "The irony is, you were right. There is a threat at this gate. A person who does not belong here. A person who has poisoned the culture I've worked to build and endangered the most important mission this airline has ever undertaken. But that person is you." Evelyn Reed finally broke. A choked, pathetic sob escaped her lips. "Mr. Finch, I didn't know. I am so sorry. I was just trying to follow procedure." "Procedure?" Finch's voice was incredulous. Was it procedure to mock his clothing? Was it procedure to accuse him of using a stolen credit card? Was it procedure to laugh in his face when he told you he was a doctor? Was it procedure to call him people like you in front of his 10-year-old daughter? He gestured toward Lily, who was now clinging tightly to her father's hand, watching the manager's collapse with a mixture of fear and vindication. "There is no procedure for bigotry," Finch declared, his voice rising to fill the terminal. "There is no protocol for racism, and there is no place for you at Apex Air." The word "you" hung in the air, a final damning verdict. For Evelyn Reed, it was the sound of her carefully constructed world, shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The career she had meticulously built, over 2 decades, clawing her way up the corporate ladder with a ruthless efficiency, was over. She knew it. Everyone watching knew it. Alistair Finch took a step back and addressed the other gate agent, Sarah, who had been watching the entire exchange with a look of pure dread. "Sarah," he said, his tone shifting from icy condemnation to professional command. "Please escort Dr. Vance and his daughter onto the aircraft immediately. Seat them in 2A and 2B. Ensure they have anything and everything they need for the duration of this flight. Water snacks for his daughter, a power bank for his laptop. I don't care what it is, make it happen. He is our guest of honor." Sarah jolted into action, nodded numbly. "Yes, sir. Right away, Mr. Finch." She turned to Elijah with deeply apologetic eyes. "Dr. Vance, please come with me." Elijah gave her a small, reassuring nod. He had no ill will toward the young woman who had been steamrolled by her superior. He squeezed Lily's hand. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go get our seats." As they walked past the counter, he glanced back at Alistair Finch, a silent exchange of understanding passing between the two men. The fight was over. Now the mission was all that mattered. As soon as they were through the jet bridge door, Finch turned his attention back to the wreckage of Evelyn Reed's career. His voice was no longer quiet. It was loud, clear, and resonant, intended for every passenger and employee within earshot. "To all our passengers on Flight 812, he announced, "on behalf of Apex Air, I offer my deepest and most sincere apologies for what you have just witnessed. This is not who we are. This is not what we stand for. The core value of this company is and always will be respect. Respect for our customers, for our colleagues, and for the basic human dignity of every person who walks through this terminal. Today that value was not just ignored, it was grotesquely violated by an employee in a position of significant authority." He looked directly at Evelyn, who was now openly weeping, her makeup running in dark streaks down her pale face. "Ms. Reed, hand me your airport ID and your company credentials." Shaking, fumbling with the lanyard around her neck, she unclipped her badges and slid them across the counter. They felt like lead in her hands. Finch picked them up and held them for all to see. "As of this moment, Evelyn Reed is suspended from all duties pending an immediate and final termination of her employment with Apex Air." A smattering of applause broke out among the passengers. The sound seemed to make Evelyn shrink even smaller. "Furthermore," Finch continued, his voice unrelenting, "I am ordering a full review of the Chicago station's management practices. I want to know if this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. I want every complaint filed against this station for the last 5 years pulled and re-examined. If this rot goes any deeper, I assure you we will cut it out." He then looked to the other gate agent, the older man, who had stood by silently. "You. What's your name?" "Robert, sir," the man mumbled. "Robert, did you agree with your manager's assessment of Dr. Vance?" Robert swallowed hard. "No, sir, I did not." "Then why did you stand there and say nothing?" Finch's question was a sharp jab. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Remember that. You will be placed on administrative leave while we review your conduct in this matter." Robert's face went slack with shock. The karma was splashing onto those who stood by and did nothing. Finally, Finch turned his attention back to the passengers. "Your flight will now begin boarding. The mechanical issue has been miraculously resolved. We will make up as much time as we can in the air. To every one of you, your next flight with Apex Air is on us. My staff will be sending vouchers to the email addresses on your reservations. Thank you for your patience and for being a witness to a necessary, albeit painful, course correction. He strode to the end of the counter and picked up the phone. He didn't dial security. He dialed the head of human resources for the entire company. David Alastair here. I'm at O'Hare Gate, K12. I've just suspended station manager Evelyn Reed. Yes, effective immediately. I want her escorted from the premises. No, not by airport police, by our own corporate security. I don't want to give her the satisfaction of playing the victim. And I want a memo drafted and sent to every single employee in this company before our wheels are up. Title it, Zero Tolerance. I want to make it abundantly clear what happened here today and why it will never ever happen again. He hung up. Evelyn Reed stood alone behind the counter, a pariah in the uniform she had worn with such pride. She was no longer a figure of authority. She was just a woman who had let hate curdle her soul, and now she was paying the price in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. Her career was over. Her reputation was in ashes. And somewhere high above the clouds, the man she had tried to tear down was flying to save a little girl's life, a little girl whose very existence would forever be a testament to her failure. On board Flight 8 on 12, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin was thick with a strange mixture of residual tension and newfound reverence. The other passengers who had been witnesses to the ugliest of human behavior now found themselves in the presence of its quiet antithesis. They stole furtive glances at Dr. Elijah Vance, their expressions a cocktail of apology, awe, and shame for their own silence. Elijah, however, paid them no mind. His focus had already shifted his mind, traveling thousands of miles ahead to a sterile operating room and the fragile heart of a 5-year-old girl. Lily, nestled against him, had finally put her book down. The magical world of dragons seemed pale compared to the real-life drama she had just witnessed. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice small, "why was that lady so angry at us?" Elijah wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. He chose his words carefully, knowing this moment would become a cornerstone of her understanding of the world. "Sweetheart, sometimes people have a sickness in their heart. It's not a sickness like the ones I fix with surgery, but a sickness of the spirit. It makes them see the world through a cloudy lens, and they judge people for reasons that make no sense, like the color of their skin or the clothes they wear. It's not about us, Lily. It's about her. Her anger is her problem, not our reality." "But she was yelling." Lily pressed her brow furrowed. "It was scary." "I know it was," he said softly. "But did you see how we didn't yell back? Strength, real strength, isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being calm when the storm is raging around you. It's about knowing your own worth so completely that nothing anyone else says can diminish it. You remember that, okay?" She nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder, the lesson sinking in. A few minutes later, Alistair Finch rose from his seat in the front row. He didn't summon Elijah. He came to him. He knelt in the aisle, a man worth billions of dollars, humbling himself on the carpeted floor of an airplane. The gesture silenced the cabin. "Dr. Vance," he began, his voice raspy with emotion. "I know I already apologized out there, but it feels wholly inadequate. My father started this airline with 2 propeller planes and a simple principle: every person who steps onto our aircraft is our honored guest. We were founded on the idea of connecting people, of making the world smaller and more accessible. To see that principle so grotesquely perverted, to see our uniform used as a weapon of prejudice, it has shaken me to my core." He looked away for a moment, gathering himself. What you and your daughter endured was a profound failure of my leadership. The culture of a company flows from the top down, and the existence of a manager like Evelyn Reed means I have allowed a rot to fester. I am ashamed, and I am so sorry. Elijah met the CEO's gaze. He saw beyond the corporate titan to the terrified grandfather beneath. Mr. Finch, he said, his voice calm and steady, I appreciate your words. I've faced similar attitudes before. What matters now is getting to San Francisco and focusing on Chloe. The incident at the gate is in the past. My mind needs to be clear for what comes next. For your family's sake, and for hers, I need you to put it behind you for now as well. We have a more important battle to fight. Finch seemed to absorb the surgeon's strength. He nodded, a look of profound gratitude on his face. You are a better man than I am, Doctor. Thank you. He stood, gave Lily a small, sad smile, and returned to his seat. A man with a new burning purpose. Upon landing, the promised efficiency was a stark contrast to the chaos at O'Hare. A woman with Alistair Finch's worried eyes and a tight, anxious posture was waiting right at the jet bridge. Dr. Vance, I'm Catherine Finch Chloe's mother. She shook his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. Thank you for coming. Thank you doesn't feel like a big enough word for what you're doing. It's my privilege, Catherine, Elijah said warmly. Let's get settled, and then I'd like to see Chloe's latest scans tonight. The journey to the hotel was a quiet, focused affair. Elijah's mind was already in the operating room, running through the steps of the complex procedure. He was no longer a passenger. He was a warrior, preparing for battle. The next 36 hours were a blur of intense preparation. At the hospital, Elijah was no longer the man in the hoodie, but a respected, almost revered figure. He commanded the pre-op meeting with a quiet authority that brooked no argument. His questions sharp, his insights brilliant. He walked the UCSF surgical team through his innovative approach, sketching complex diagrams on a whiteboard, his hands moving with the same grace and precision they would later show with a scalpel. He was in his element, a master in his domain. Then came the day of the surgery. For 9.5 hours, time seemed to stop inside the hermetically sealed world of Operating Room 3. The rhythmic beeping of the heart-lung bypass machine was the only metronome in a symphony of quiet, focused action. Elijah was the conductor, his team a world-class orchestra. He worked with an almost supernatural calm, navigating the microscopic, treacherous terrain of a child's heart. He was repairing the architecture of life itself, stitching together hope where there had been none. In the waiting room, Alistair and Catherine Finch lived a lifetime. They drank stale coffee, paced the floor, and prayed. Alistair found himself reflecting on Evelyn Reed. His anger had cooled into a resolute determination. He realized that firing her wasn't enough. A single weed can be pulled, but if the soil is bad, more will grow. He spent hours on his phone, not checking stocks, but dictating emails to his executive board. He was drafting a blueprint for a complete cultural overhaul of Apex Air. The zero-tolerance memo was just the beginning. Finally, the doors to the waiting room swung open. Dr. Vance stood there, his face etched with fatigue, but his eyes shining. He had removed his surgical mask, and his small, tired smile was the most beautiful thing Alistair Finch had ever seen. "She's a champion," Elijah said, his voice soft. "The procedure went as well as we could have possibly hoped. Her new ventricle is functioning beautifully. The next few days are critical, but her heart is strong. She fought for us in there." The dam of restrained emotion broke. Catherine collapsed into her father's arms, sobbing with relief. Alistair, a man who had stared down corporate raiders and market crashes without flinching, wept openly. He approached Elijah not with a handshake, but with a full, heartfelt embrace. "You saved her," he whispered, his voice thick with tears. "You saved our family." While a little girl began her road to recovery, the shockwaves from Gate K-12 were tearing through the corporate structure of Apex Air. The zero-tolerance memo landed in 40,000 employee inboxes simultaneously. It was brutal in its clarity, detailing the appalling and racially motivated mistreatment of a passenger and his child, and announcing Evelyn Reed's termination. It named her actions as a betrayal of every value Apex Air stands for. Evelyn Reed found out she was fired when her access to the company network was suddenly revoked. Her phone began to light up with messages from horrified colleagues. An hour later, 2 stern-faced corporate security officers arrived at her home to collect her remaining company property. There was no severance package, only a letter from legal counsel. Her career, built on 2 decades of ruthless ambition, had been professionally and publicly guillotined. She tried calling contacts at other airlines, old colleagues she had networked with for years. One hung up on her. Another simply said, "I saw the video, Evelyn." And the line went dead. The clip filmed by the young passenger had gone viral within airline circles, a damning testament to her downfall. Robert, the gate agent who had stood by in silence, was summoned to a video conference with Alistair Finch himself. He expected to be fired. Instead, Finch told him, "Your silence, Robert, made you a part of the problem. But I believe people can learn. You're being demoted for 6 months and reassigned to our new central office for cultural development. Your first task is to help design a training module for all employees on the bystander intervention. You will use your own failure as the primary case study." It was a punishment that was also a path to redemption, a far more profound consequence than simple termination. And Sarah, the young flustered agent who had tried to help. She received a personal call from the CEO. He promoted her to assistant station manager at O'Hare, effective immediately. "You showed decency and courage under pressure," he told her. "That's the only kind of leadership I want at this company." A week later, after confirming Chloe Finch was stable and thriving in the pediatric ICU, Elijah and Lily prepared to fly home. Alistair Finch had insisted on flying them personally on one of the company's private jets, but Elijah had politely declined. "We're regular passengers, Mr. Finch," he'd said. "We fly like everyone else." As they sat at their gate, a flight attendant approached them, her expression hesitant. "Dr. Vance, my name is Maria. I hope this isn't too forward, but I have to say something." Her eyes were filled with tears. "I read the company memo, and my colleagues told me who it was about. 5 years ago, you performed a Norwood procedure on my baby brother Leo. The doctors said he had a 50-50 chance. He's 12 now. He's the captain of his soccer team." She pulled out her phone and showed him a picture of a smiling, gap-toothed boy in a bright green soccer jersey holding a trophy. "You gave him back to us. When I learned what that woman did to you, how she spoke to you, I was heartbroken. On behalf of every decent employee at this airline, I am so sorry. And thank you. Thank you for being the man you are both in and out of the hospital." Elijah was deeply moved, humbled by her words. He looked down at Lily. She wasn't reading. She was watching the entire exchange, her eyes wide. She saw the tears in the flight attendant's eyes. She saw the picture of the healthy little boy. She saw the profound respect being shown to her father. And in that moment, she finally understood. The anger of the woman at the Chicago gate seemed small and insignificant now. It was a hateful noise, but it couldn't drown out the beautiful music of a life saved, of gratitude given, of respect earned. Her father's strength wasn't just in his calm response to hatred. It was in his hands, his mind, and his heart. It was a strength that healed, that inspired, and that would always, always fly higher than any storm of prejudice. As they boarded the plane home, Lily took her father's hand. Her small grip filled with a new and powerful understanding of the hero who walked beside her. Evelyn Reed learned the hard way that prejudice isn't just a moral failing, it's a professional liability. In her quest to exert power over a man she deemed unworthy, she collided with a force far greater than she could have imagined, karma delivered personally by the one man she should have been desperate to impress. This story is a powerful reminder that the true measure of a person is not their title, their uniform, or the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Respect costs nothing. But as Evelyn discovered, disrespect can cost you absolutely everything. If you believe that justice was served and that karma hit back hard, show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video to spread the message that bigotry has no place in our world, and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications for more true stories of karma and consequence. What would you have done if you were a passenger at that gate? Let us know in the comments below.